When you hear the words video game controller, what instantly comes to mind? I'd guess that you have a pretty specific image. A gamepad with 2 grips, ABXY face buttons, triggers, bumpers, 2 joysticks, and a D-pad, right? That's become the go-to design for hardware companies over the years, with slight variations to shape and button placement. Now, that design feels natural to a lot of gamers, but that isn't true for everybody. For players with disabilities, a controller can be a barrier for entry. For video games to be as accessible to as many people as possible, a little innovation is needed. And that's what PlayStation set out to create when it designed the Access Controller. Now, you might remember this striking controller from CES 2023, when Sony surprise revealed it at the event. At the time, it was known as Project Leonardo, and it would serve as PlayStation's first ever adaptive controller. Now, it would officially launch last December, opening the door for more players to enjoy games like God of War Ragnarok and Final Fantasy XVI. But what goes into creating a device like this? Well, a lot of creativity and a lot more collaboration. So if you've never seen it before, let me walk you through what the Access Controller is and how it works. It's a round device surrounded by white panels, which act as buttons. The idea is that players with disabilities can customize the controller in a lot of different ways, from putting in different panels that better suit their needs, to using swappable button labels to easily remember remapped inputs. Also customizable is the black joystick that juts out from the side. Now, that can be adjusted and outfitted with different stick parts. That design pairs with a full software customization suite that lets players adjust the controls and remap buttons easily. Plus, it features 4 3.5mm jacks, which allow players to hook other devices up to it. You could pair it with a DualSense, or even an external adaptive tool, or a second Access controller. Now, it's an incredibly unique design, and I've been curious about how it came together ever since I first saw it. To get the details on its creation, I spoke with John Zarganis. He's the director of product operations at Sony Interactive Entertainment and was part of the team that put this project together. Now, according to Zarganis, PlayStation started working on the concept in 2018, as its market research started to show how many disabled players could benefit from an accessibility tool like this. But knowing there was a need for a controller like this was the easy part. The hard part would be figuring out a design that worked for as many people as possible. Now, when it comes to accessibility, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Even carefully designed controllers like this can't always account for every single use case. So Sony put its focus on solving 3 of the most common pain points that players face. The first is a basic one. Physically holding the controller can be a challenge for a lot of players. Number 2 is that it can be hard to accurately press buttons that are small and clustered together on a standard gamepad. And finally, thumbsticks and shoulder pads can be tricky to manage for some. Those 3 areas would be the starting points. The final design that you're seeing now wasn't actually Sony's first crack at it. The team actually put together 4 different designs originally. Now, one of those was a larger scale tabletop controller, while another one had more of a keyboard layout. There were also 2 split controller design concepts, which the team decided to pursue further. That ideation process eventually led to the UFO-like design in the final controller you see now. While the team had a strong idea in mind, it couldn't bring it to life entirely on its own. It would need plenty of help from accessibility consultants to make sure it was considering as many use cases and disability needs as possible. Sony linked up with organizations like Able Gamers and Special Effect to get feedback on the design. That's when the team got some important wisdom. They were reminded that the Access controller wasn't going to exist in a vacuum. It would become part of a larger ecosystem of accessibility solutions, both those that came before and the ones still to come. It would need to neatly work with tools like wheelchair mounts, third-party switches, and more. As much as the team wanted it to be something that could be taken out of the box and used with no hassle, it needed to give users more flexibility. And that's actually how the device's 3.5mm ports came to be, which opened the door for players to use the Access controller alongside assistive tools that they already owned. Now, there was just one more piece of the puzzle: games. An adaptive controller can only go so far if the games users play with it aren't accessible themselves. Now, if you've played a PlayStation 5 game this generation, you've probably noticed that accessibility is a big deal for PlayStation these days. Games like The Last of Us Part 1 come with enormous accessibility menus that let players tweak a wide array of settings to their needs. The developers behind those games actually had a say in the final Access controller design too. Studios like Naughty Dog, Insomniac Games, and Guerrilla all gave the team a list of features that they wanted included in the hardware. Now, after that long cycle of design, feedback, and revision, the team created the final version of the Access controller that's available today. Now, it may look small, but it's a hugely important piece of technology that gives players with disabilities a better chance at being able to experience PS5 games. And PlayStation knows that that's only the start. There isn't one magic solution that can make games accessible for everybody. It's an ongoing mission that requires ongoing creativity. John Zarganis tells me that PlayStation is prepared to do just that and break down as many barriers as it can. And that's the attitude that the gaming industry needs when it comes to accessibility. If you're interested in learning more about this, head over to digitaltrends.com where you can read the full feature about this controller with quotes from John Zarganis.